Good evening and welcome to this evening's study session of the City Council. Agendas for study sessions, including concept reviews, can be found by visiting Broomfield's website at broomfield.org. Our agenda this evening includes 3 study session items. Seeing there are no concept reviews on the agenda this evening, there will not be any public comment. The study session will be televised on Channel 8 and through live video streaming on Broomfield's website. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team at the back of the council chambers. Before we begin with tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment to mention a couple of noteworthy accomplishments. On Saturday, I was honored to attend the Fall 2022 Congressional Service Awards, where Congressman Joe Neguse recognized one of our amazing Broomfield volunteers, Karen Steele, with an esteemed award for Volunteer of the Year. Ms. Steele serves our community as Open Space Foundation President, a nature program leader, and a key person for VOAD, the Volunteer Emergency Management Group. Thank you so much, Karen, and for all that you do for Broomfield, and congratulations on your much-deserved award. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Broomfield's elections team, including the election judges, for an extremely well-run election. The time and care you put into ensuring a successful outcome is impressive, and we certainly appreciate all of your efforts consistently. I will tell you that we have some council members attending remotely. There's a conference going on for the National League of Cities and other reasons, so that's why you'll see half of us up here and the other half will be on screen. So we'll now continue with this evening's agenda, starting with a review of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding council's compensation mandated with the passing of ordinance number 2165. I'll ask staff to begin our discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Nancy Rogers, a city and county attorney. Ordinance 2165 was approved by council in 2021, and it was historically a regular update to council compensation. But one of the requests that council put into place was a mandatory review of the compensation so that council could, with your busy agenda calendar, make sure that you review this. As a reminder, right now, our council members that were elected prior to the November 2nd, 2021 election get paid $800 a month. Those elected after or at the November 2nd, 2021 election and going forward get paid $1,200 a month. The mayor pro tem after the November 2nd, 2021 election gets paid $300 more. And the mayor after the November 2nd, 2021 election receives a sum of $1,750 per month. The reason we have this mandatory review is so that council at that time, without it having to be a council request, can tell staff that we would like you to come back with a increase to that compensation. Additionally, something that council added, just as a reminder, is there will be an automatic cost of living increase effective July 1st. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say cost of living increase. Every 2 years, and the first one will go into effect July 1st, 2023, and it's an amount equal to the average percentage increase in wage provided to city employees in the previous year. So we'll see that first increase July 1 of 2023 for those that are still sitting council members. At this time, if there is any interest, is there any interest from council, I guess, in revisiting these amounts?
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Any comments from council? Councilmember Marshallson.
Just a question. The increase that you said goes in effect January 1st. That doesn't take effect until the next council elections, right?
It actually will take effect July 1st, 2023. July. It's an automatic increase that is not something approved by council. So different than the increase to 1,200 or 1,750 or the 300 increase on the mayor pro tems. That was something sort of an actual amount passed by council for that time. That's why in our reading of state statute, you cannot benefit from that. Other cities and local governments have this sort of automatic increase in their council compensation. And I can resend out a resource that has a little bit more of the legal advice behind that.
I remember obviously this before the election, so I wasn't on council, but I remember the discussion.
Yeah.
at all?
That's it.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Any direction? Are we, Councilmember Lim?
Yes, I just had a related question. We had, I think in August, discussed the possibility of council member health care benefits. And I thought that that discussion was going to come forward in the not too distant future. Do we have an update on that?
We do, Councilmember Lim. At the August study session, when there was council direction to move forward with adding a benefits provision, which would be to this section of the code. When we looked at the calendar at the time, we were actually thinking we could do that in December and January for first and second reading. But as the council agendas started loading up in the late summer and early fall, that was something we did move. If you'll recall from that discussion, and to Councilmember Marsh Holshan's point, everybody acknowledged that this would be a benefit that sitting council members would not be able to receive. Therefore, we knew we had a little bit of time. We don't want to wait until we're right up against the November 2023 election. So we're looking at bringing it back March, April. Actually, executive staff's going to have a meeting tomorrow to finalize those dates, and we'll get that on the calendar.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaaf, I didn't see who was first. My apologies if you were.
Thank you. Just one clarification on the ordinance. So it says that it shall automatically increase every 2 years on July 1st, starting in 2023. So is that going to automatically increase, or the second question or clarification question would be, is that going to come to council for a resolution or an ordinance to then pass that like we have in the past?
No, the automatic increase is already in the code and it's already budgeted for. So there's nothing that needs to come back to council.
Okay, so it'll happen and council will not have to deal with that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the only time council would have to deal with it if you wanted to change those base amounts that we work the percentage off of, the 1,200, the 1,200 and the 1,750.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I just have a clarifying question because I'm reading in section 202030 compensation review under B, and then there's the last sentence says, this is where it increases on July 1st, but it says any increase made pursuant to this subsection B will take effect at the beginning of a member's new term of office and would not take effect during a member's term of office. Because that's how I remember it. And so yeah, I think it does. I don't think it automatically takes effect.
You know what, Councilmember Anderson, let me review that again, because as we were working on the annual calendar, we did just say this would take effect in July. And now as I sit here in front of everyone,
No,
yes, so then it would take let me look at that again, and then we will report back to council when on that July date about what the increase would be, and then the effective date.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That'd be super helpful. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Well, I guess I'm assuming we're not going to make any changes. We'll keep it as is, and we've built in a review process, which makes it a lot better. So we don't have to bring it up every year when we're doing reviews and increases for staff. So I do appreciate that future proofing of the system. And we'll move on. Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. Our next agenda item this evening is a continuation of our discussion of resolution number 2022-141 regarding opting out of Colorado's paid family and medical leave insurance program. The vote on resolution number 2022-141 has been tabled to now December 6th, 2022. And this is a study session, so no vote will be taken tonight. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. When I first looked over there, Miss Macklin, you were down behind the dais, so I was thinking, Jesus, Pat doing this tonight?
Someone left me a stool. I don't know.
Miss Macklin.
Mayor,
Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Tonight's discussion is a continuation of our previous discussion regarding opting out. Jake, if you want to take us to the next slide. So just to give you an overview of what I hope to cover tonight, we'll go ahead and review the question and answers. If you recall, we asked council to please provide staff with the questions in advance so that we had some time to research and come back to you with information. We'll do an update on the neighboring agencies, an update on the Colorado agencies, and then we'll talk about funding. So we received a handful of questions and these were emailed to council prior to the meeting, but I recognize you may not have all had a chance to review them. So I thought we would review them together if that's helpful. One of the questions posed was if we opt out now in 2022, and then we give notice to opt in next year, 2023, when would employees receive benefits? So neither the law nor the regulations as currently adopted create a waiting period beyond that time frame where premiums are payable in 2023 and benefits are not available until 2024. If a governmental entity declines coverage, so we opt out, and then we later vote to become covered, opting in, the governmental entity is subject to premiums beginning on the first day of the calendar quarter after the vote and notification to the state. So therefore, if CCOB became covered entity in 2024 and began paying premiums, employees who met the eligibility and statutory requirements could receive benefits at that time. The governmental entity or employee must remain in the program for 3 years. The next question that was posed is if employee opts in individually, is there a waiting period before benefits become available? So if they sign up in 2022 or a future date, 2023, 2024. So benefits don't become available to anyone until January 1st, 2024. Therefore, an employee who enrolls in the program before January 1st, 2024 would be responsible for payment of the premiums during 2023. Under the current regulations, an employee who enrolls in the program after January 1st, 2024 would not have a waiting period beyond meeting the eligibility requirements. This question's a little bit longer, so bear with me. The state of Colorado created the Colorado Family Medical Leave Insurance Program to provide covered employees with 12 weeks of partial paid leave from work for certain qualifying reasons. So what the question was asking is, as I go through these reasons, could I clarify which of these family qualifying events would not be qualifying events for CCOB's current short-term disability program? So I'll go through each one of them and compare the two. So to care for a new child during the first year of birth, adoption, or foster care. So an eligible employee who actually gives birth to a child would be eligible for 6 weeks of short-term disability, which we reference as STD leave, for a vaginal delivery and 8 weeks for a C-section. If the mother suffered additional medical complications tied to the pregnancy or childbirth, she may be eligible for additional short-term disability leave as medically necessary. The second point, to care for their own serious health condition or a family's serious health condition. So short-term disability is for the employee's disability. So and if an employee themselves has a serious medical condition, they would be eligible for short-term disability leave. STD covers the employee's serious health condition only, not a family member. To make arrangements for a family member's military deployment. So short-term disability, again, doesn't cover military deployments because it's non-medically related leave. Same with addressing immediate safety needs or the impact of domestic violence for themselves or a family member. Short-term disability does not cover that as well. In summary, just to add a few additional points regarding CCOB's short-term disability. So our short-term disability benefit provides employees with 100% income replacement when the employee themselves has a qualifying disability that lasts for more than 7 days. Typically, this insurance is used for when employees have a medical procedure, a surgery, an illness, or an injury that would cause them to be unable to work for up to 13 weeks. In most industries, short-term disability typically provides 60 to 66 2/3 income replacement. CCOB is incredibly fortunate in that our short-term disability policy provides employees with 100% income replacement, which is very uncommon in the public or the private sector. So typically what would happen is an employee would receive a reduced wage. The short-term disability would pay 60 to 66 and 2/3. And then an employee would supplement that with their other leave banks, whether that be sick or vacation. Next question. In Ms. Macklin's 10:30 email reply, it states that any complications or additional medical conditions tied to a pregnancy, such as bed rest, postpartum depression, complications from giving birth would likely, emphasis added, be covered as well. How would eligibility for short-term disability be determined for these conditions, and have employees been granted short-term disability for these conditions in the past? So CCOB short-term disability policy is administered by a third-party insurance company. They review the short-term disability application, any medical certification that's provided, and notes from the treating provider. And they are the ones determining the eligibility for the benefits. Employees apply directly with the third-party insurance company, so their medical records provided directly to the insurance company, and CCOB HR staff has no line of sight to the specific medical condition that an employee is being considered for. So as a result, I can't confirm whether CCOB employees have been granted STD for the specific pregnancy-related conditions mentioned above. However, the STD policy is written to cover these types of medical complications tied to pregnancy, so there's no reason to believe that these conditions would not be covered. Next question. In Ms. Macklin's 10:30 email, it states that one way CCOB employees are eligible to access paid leave with 100% income replacement is through donated leave, up to 480 hours of paid leave available after 6 months of employment. If an employee felt that they could benefit from donated leave, how would the process work to procure that from other employees? So HR maintains a general donated leave bank that's populated by employees who have excess annual leave at the end of the year. Our cap is 320 hours. So any hours in excess of that are moved over to the donated leave bank. This leave bank is made available to all eligible employees. So we're not having to go out and solicit donated leave each time there's an incident for an individual employees. Employees submit a donated leave request to their department head for review and consideration. The approved donated leave request is then forwarded to HR for review and consideration. Employees do have to provide HR with FMLA certification as well as medical certification to support the request for donated leave. HR verifies the requesting leave balances to ensure that they've been depleted, along with the required paperwork in conjunction with the department head approval, and then approves the request accordingly. HR reviews the status of the request every 30 calendar days and requests additional medical certification if necessary. If for some reason we should exhaust our CCOB donated leave bank, which I understand has not happened, then we certainly could go out and solicit additional leave. All of the solicitation is done in confidence. Nothing's reported in terms of the person who needs the leave or those that have donated the leave. So those were all of the questions that I received from council prior to this meeting. So with that, I just wanted to provide council with an update on the neighboring agencies that have opted out since we last met. So Adams 12, BVSD, and Boulder have opted out since we met. And then we've received an update on the Colorado agencies, the list that was provided to you. We are up to 84 local municipalities and counties that have opted out, and Adams County is voting tonight. If for some reason council decides not to opt out for 2023, staff will need direction from council as to how to fund the unbudgeted family premium expense for 2023. A couple of funding options would be that we could reduce our current short-term disability benefit from 100% income replacement down to 60% income replacement. We could reduce or eliminate the budget for our pay for performance merit increases for employees. We could modify our medical insurance plan designs to reduce benefits. So for example, we just rolled out with this open enrollment that in order to support our employees' physical and mental health, we have 0 copays for any mental health services, 0 copays for PCP services, and a number of other reductions that allowed us to enhance our benefit package and reduce the out-of-pocket expense for our employees. We certainly could roll that back the other way and change the plan design. Another alternative would be to reduce the amount of premium contributions that CCOB provides its employees. Those are just a couple of different ideas. I know council received a letter from the Employee Review Committee today. Not sure if everyone's had an opportunity to review that. But certainly whatever changes we would have to make to the benefits package, we would want to lean heavily on our Employee Review Committee to communicate those changes. And as you could see from their letter, their position still stands. So with that, I don't have any additional information to present, so I will turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Macklin, for that overview and update. We'll go to council questions now. So Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have a question on this. I would like to thank my fellow council members for allowing time on this subject and the engagement from staff. The information has been very helpful. The engagement from staff has been very appreciative. In terms of kind of where we were is kind of being tossed this grand, idea and issue and having some time to really kind of flesh it out, get some questions answered. I really did appreciate that. From what I've seen is that, if we were a private business, we would meet the threshold to opt out. And I do believe that is the case for CCOB, and thus I would agree that we should opt out. In the next year, I do believe that we should continue to evaluate whether the family program would benefit some of our employees, whether this could be an augmentation of our existing benefits, or if this is something that we, don't need at all. I think that there is, some work to be done to ensure that the benefits that we have fully exceed or meet or exceed that threshold for private businesses. The one area I do have some questions about whether it would actually meet that threshold is that donated leave area, whether that would be sufficient to say, yeah, that does meet that threshold that's needed for those private businesses, or is that one that wouldn't? So you don't have to answer that tonight, but that would be, one area as we look at this in this next year, that would be one area where I would say, do we actually meet that threshold, or is that an area where we really don't? And thus we could augment that, or maybe we don't need to. So,
Okay.
but I do think that we should opt out at this point. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take the exact opposite approach of my colleague. I absolutely do not believe we should opt out. As I stated at the last council meeting, here, I have a question for you. Why wasn't this budgeted for? Denver dealt with theirs in August. Why didn't we deal with this sooner than the last minute?
So our budget is put together quite a bit earlier in the year, and you'd have to tell me exactly what, I want to say March. Probably that we start putting those together, and staff's strong recommendation was to opt out, as well as the employee review committee's recommendation as well. The current benefits are budgeted for, and staff felt that was sufficient. We don't have an infinite pot of money, so if we were to budget for this, we would likely have to say no to something else if we were to say yes to this.
I understand that. I'm still concerned that we're doing this last minute. We should have had a study session. This obviously got passed back, last November. We've had all year to deal with this. So I am disappointed that we're dealing with this last minute. I'm going to echo my comments from last meeting. It is a disgrace that we are one of the only industrialized nations in the world that doesn't have a national family leave program. Obviously, we as City Council don't have any say in that because that's a national thing, and Congress hasn't acted on that. But the Colorado legislature tried to do something to deal with it, and the way they did it came about was to do a dedicated revenue stream, and that dedicated revenue stream is through taxes on fees on employers and employees, and it's not, in my opinion, a personal benefit to an employee. It is a social safety net program that is funded through this manner. That is why I do not believe that we should opt out. That being said, I did send my colleagues and staff Denver's proposal that they just enacted, in which they do a 320-hour 100% income replacement that is full family leave. It's in addition to their pay time off, in addition to their sick time. That is, if we are going to opt out of that, I do believe that we need to enhance our benefits now. The short-term disability is not adequate, in my opinion. Donated leave, in my opinion, is not adequate. Donated leave, in my opinion, is a wrong message to send to our staff, because we should be encouraging people to take time off, spend time with their families, not make work their entire lives. And the donated leave, in my opinion, is just not the right message to send. I do believe we should move forward with a Denver-like program. Have you looked into that program?
Mhm.
And do we know what that would cost if we did that?
So Denver's program is actually more like FMLA in terms of the terms. It's not available to employees until they've been employed for 12 months or 1,250 hours.
I believe it was 6 months, according to the memo I saw on.
Yeah, so based on the website, they're mirroring FMLA provisions. So if an employee were to qualify for the terms of FMLA, which would be 12 months of employment and 1,250 hours, then an employee would be eligible for the same conditions with the same medical certifications required. So essentially what they're doing is taking that FMLA model and they're funding that with income replacement. FMLA is purely a job protection. So they've just put income replacement with that.
Respectfully, I don't believe that to be the case. I was looking at the memo, the ordinance that Denver passed when they opted out of FMLA, directed their staff to implement a 320-hour 8-week program, family leave program that was available after 6 months of employment. That's
So
how I read it.
The information I obtained as early as late as last night is from Denver's website.
Okay, well,
So in terms of trying to anticipate what that would cost us, it's difficult, similar to what I said in the past. Typically, when you go to a self-funded model like that, you look at claims or experience history to inform what that would cost you. So not knowing who might have a medical condition or a baby or what they would make, we could certainly take an average employee wage and project what that would cost us for 8 weeks with an estimated number of employees who might use it. But it would be really difficult to anticipate what that budget would be right now.
okay. Well, Mara and my colleagues, I'm definitely opposed philosophically to opting out of this program. I believe it's the wrong message to send to our community. That being said, if we do opt out, I would like to move forward with a similar system to what Denver has implemented. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Anderson, then Cohen.
Thanks. I will just quick weigh in here and just going back to the employees council letter where the 20 members representing, it wasn't my understanding is this wasn't a quickly chosen process, but this has been in place for a bit of time. And their recommendation is to opt out. And I would put heavy weight on that decision. And also the money has to come from somewhere. It's either going to come from within the other compensation pieces, or we go out to the greater community and say, take more of their tax money to fund it. It has to come from somewhere. So I am fully in support of opting out and revisiting the program in 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I would echo Councilmember Marsh-Holson's comments in the sense that I do feel like we've been sort of backed into a corner on time-wise and not given much choice. Because I don't know if there was just groupthink since so many other communities were opting out, but I do think going forward, we can opt out, we can opt in again at a later date, but it'd be worth asking staff to look into what Denver has developed and to look into a situation where some of the leave can be paid for by the state and not fully by the city. There might be some benefits there. And I just wanted to note one of the interesting things about the Care Bank thing that program that Denver developed as an alternative is that they were able to expand reasons for leaving. So they have caring for a child during the first year and foster placement. They have caring for a family member, and they have an employee's own serious health condition. They've also added safe leave for domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, or abuse cases. So I think there's potential for looking at what benefits we provide and maybe expanding on that. I would love to see us be able to provide full paternity and maternity care leave that's paid for. I think that's a benefit I think all employees should have. So I will support opting out for now, but I do believe that's something we should do in the interim before we revisit this perhaps in a year.
Thank you. Anyone else in the ether or? I don't see my peeps. Oh, okay. Austin, Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with the sentiment behind Councilmember Marsh Holson's objection in that we as a society need to do better. But I think we should, like I said last time, opt out for this 1 year, revisit the program later because it's not going to hurt us in any capacity. We'll just be paying, we and the employees will be paying into a program they will have no benefit from until 2024. And then if we want to have a conversation about other benefits or expanding the benefits that we currently offer, or the definition of what counts as qualified leave, that should be saved for a different session where we actually talk about employee benefits in that capacity. I do want to say thank you to the Employee Review Committee who sent us that letter and all the work that they did to come to the conclusion that, or their recommendation of opting out, because I think they really did spend quite a bit of time, energy and effort, and they are making a decision based on kind of what we do. We were elected to this job. We make a decision on behalf of our constituents. And that's kind of what they did. So I think they really are having the best interest of the employees of CCOB in mind. So that's all I have to say, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. To start with, I'm going to agree with everything that Councilmember Schaaf said originally. So echo that one. And then, Nikki, I don't know if you could just clarify for me. I'm still very unclear as to what the city provides currently. So just for a very basic one, for maternity or paternity leave, I heard you mention something 6 weeks or 8 weeks at 100%, but then it sounds like it's not really 100%. So can you just sort of break down for me what that looks like?
Sure. So for a female that would actually have the baby, so if she delivered the baby, short-term disability provides 100% income replacement, 6 weeks for a vaginal delivery, and 8 weeks for a C-section. That's tied to the medical healing post-delivery. Any additional time beyond that for an employee to, a male or female employee to have traditional baby bonding time, they're provided with job protection for the first year after that, and they're afforded the opportunity to take up to 12 weeks off. During that 12 weeks, they would be compensated either through their sick leave bank, their annual leave bank, a donated leave bank if they had exhausted all of their own leave, any banked holiday pay or comp pay that they would have.
Okay, so that 12 weeks is on top of the 6 to 8 weeks that you mentioned?
No.
No.
FMLA,
so 12 weeks
yep.
total.
Yep.
Okay, so there'll be 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then an additional 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the situation?
Yes, it really depends on the mother, the
Okay.
father, the medical situation tied to that.
Okay, but they'd be entitled up to 12 weeks. The first 6 weeks would be 100% covered. The second 6 weeks, they'd have to rely on their own sick leave, or as you mentioned, I think that this donated leave bank that the city has. Okay, okay.
Annual leave as well, which
Annual leave as well,
is
okay.
known as vacation leave on the outside.
Right. And then, Councilmember Holshan mentioned, that's what I'm trying to figure out, what the city of Denver has just enacted, and so what they're planning on doing or are doing, how does that differ from what we're doing right now?
Sure. So Denver is providing additional maternity and paternity leave. So they've identified that it's important for mothers and fathers to have time off after they're with their baby. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It is an incredible benefit, and one that they are funding to just, it isn't requiring employees to utilize sick or vacation during that period of time. They're essentially giving them an additional bank of free leave. And the concept itself is not bad at all. I'm a mom of 4 people, so I don't disagree with 4 people, 4 children. They are little people. I do not disagree with the concept at all. And I don't know that many people do. I think what we're really focused on is what's our current benefits package and how are we funding that? And if we're going to look at swapping out any of those benefits, that we have to identify a funding source and that we have to take a bigger view to say, of this pot of money we have to fund our CCOB benefits, what's most important to our entire employee population? And is that maternity and paternity leave? Is that increase in retirement contributions? Is that an increase in medical benefit premiums? And really that's what the ERC is in position to do. Is for us as staff to bring forward options to them and for them to be able to survey all of the employees in the city of County and Broomfield and really be that voice to say, here's what's important to our employees. And then staff can and council can look at that pot of money and decide, here are the recommendations that they brought forward. Are we going to provide additional funding to support additional benefits? Or do we have to say no to something we already have in order to say yes to something that we'll add?
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. If we're going to do something in one place, we need to figure out if we're going to cut back somewhere else, because as you mentioned, there's not an unlimited pot of money, but it might be an interesting discussion to have at some point. So it's my understanding, you said Denver is then doing the 100% leave up to 12 weeks. Is that right then?
No, up to 8 weeks.
Up to 8
This
weeks.
new program they rolled out essentially is instead of participating in the family
Right.
program, they've
Right,
created
right,
their
right.
own program that provides 8 weeks.
And the family program provides 12 weeks, but it's only at a reduced wage, right?
It is, depending on your income, it provides income replacement at 37% up to 90%.
Okay. So they're all, it sounds like all these options are different. They all have pluses and minuses, and it's just deciding which one you want to go with, I guess. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Next is Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reflect on the importance of this discussion and how pleased I am that this is coming forward because the benefits for our employees is a very important thing. I do agree that we should opt out at this point, but I also appreciate Councilmember Marsh-Holson's perspective around a National Family Leave Act, and we don't have that, and we're not in a position to do that. But I also think that the Employee Review Committee has done a very, very mature job in taking a look and making their recommendation. But I do agree we should come back and take a further look at this in a more deliberate and maybe more focused manner. But at this point, I would vote to opt out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I'm in favor of opting out for now, but I do have some requests that, as I think Councilmember Cohen said, I would like the staff to look into the possibility of expanding the reasons that an employee could take short-term disability. That's something I would, could it be expanded to paternity leave? Could it be expanded to taking care of the health of a family member? So I understand that staff is saying they can't estimate the exact amount that would cost, but I would hope you could get statistically, perhaps, what percentage of employees end up having these situations, that we could come back in the future when we would possibly review this again to give estimates on what each of those different expansions would cost the city. And then I was concerned about the timing of this revisitation of this in a year. So as we were told that, you know, the budget process starts in March, and it's, you know, hard to wiggle things after that. I mean, don't we almost have to have that, you know, a revisiting of this subject even before the budget is the year is halfway gone, because it has to be worked into the budget. So, and that's what's confusing to me at this point. If we say we want to revisit this in a year, then we're going to be backed into the corner again because it can't be worked into the budget. So what's the timing of revisiting this in relationship to actually being able to have a decision be implemented in a timely way?
I think one thing to consider when we talked about waiting a year to revisit this, the hope was that we would have time to see how the program flushed out with the state. And so those two things are slightly in conflict, Councilmember Lim. You're absolutely right. It may be that we have to put a placeholder in the budget for some type of similar or comparable program. But I really think that based on staff's recommendation and ERC's recommendation, it would be prudent to wait for as long as possible in 2023 to see how the state is handling this and where things lie. Concurrently with that, staff and the ERC would be working together to evaluate our current benefits package and find out from our employees what is of greatest value to them. If we had an additional $855,000 budgeted, what would staff want that to be spent on? If we were to have to say no to something that we currently have in place as it relates to our comp and benefits package in order to say yes to something else, what would be palatable to say no to for the general employee population, and what would be trading that for?
Okay, so that, I mean, that does address the question that, you know, I really think if we're probably, which I did say I was in favor of opting out to see how things turn out. Seeing how things turn out is going to take a year, I think. And then we're actually not looking at opting in 2024. We're looking at opting in possibly in 2025. That's the timeline I'm seeing that is longer than what, you know, might otherwise be desirable.
I think two things, Councilmember Lim. Upon council's direction, from a project perspective and a financial perspective. So we can stop one of the things that we're doing now and focus on this and bring it back. Part of the, and identify the funds. And so I think we've all become accustomed to, there was over 24 things that we didn't budget for last year that we're doing right now. So we're accustomed to that. And from a time frame perspective, it was critical to us to have the ERC in place before any recommendations could be made. So again, this staff is accustomed to shifting and adapting and moving. So the fact that the budget starts in March, again, at council direction, if council directs staff to, whether it's have a placeholder, it's critical to staff that we continue to utilize ERC. So our team needs to indicate what is important to them from a full review of those benefits. So right now, it's not unlike regular staff. They have a list of 10 things that folks want them to look at. And if this is, again, from a council direction perspective, from a priority perspective, we can shift that.
Well, I mean, I think most of us, when we said we wanted to opt out, but we wanted to revisit this, were hoping that it would be possible to, you know, do this in a 2024, you know, implementation timeframe. And I'm just pointing out that doesn't seem to fit with the idea of both council and ERC would probably like to get more information and see how this plays out statewide. And if the state does better definition of the process and everything too, that we're looking for answers with that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Hi all, thank you. Sorry, I'm just now on video. I was eating and I'm still continuing to eat. I am for opting out just until we know more. Like you guys have said, I really feel like, individuals obviously can opt in individually right now. And I just want legal language that we visit it yearly. And if we do opt in, then we also revisit it. I believe it was every 3 years, of course, to see if it's necessary. Nikki, I just need to know what information gaps are we seeing at the state level? Just so that we're just more aware and more informed as to, we say we're waiting on the state. What exactly are we waiting on the state to do or show us, or those sorts of things?
A couple things aren't clearly defined. Like my original, sorry, let me get the answer. When I responded to the waiting period, so I think there's a couple of things. So when we talk about the regulations as they're currently adopted, not having a waiting period, I think as we all know, that can change over the course of the year, right? It's not necessarily a gap. It's really waiting to see, even if there wasn't a gap, right? We're saying that currently, based on the benefits we provide, it would not be beneficial to all of the employees in Broomfield to pay into this program for the benefits provided. So with what we know today, we're making that recommendation, as is the ERC. I think it's important to keep an eye on the program over the course of the next year and see if any of these regulations as they're currently adopted change based on people opting out, right? So I don't know whether the state anticipated that this many municipalities would opt out, with us being at 84 right now, whether that will impact how they run the program or not. Additionally, they have provisions for agencies to opt out if they have other supplemental programs. They anticipated a lot of third-party insurance carriers coming forward with supplemental programs to augment this. So far, nobody's come forward with that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I don't have any other further questions right now, but I do want to kind of flesh out a little bit more as to, how our system is just, better right now. And, if we can forecast anything too, is there any way that they are forecasting anything, like any future regulations that they're thinking about, or do you have any idea on that?
So far, they've stated that the premiums can go from 0.9% up to 1.2%. So they have not stated how quickly those premiums can escalate. I think they're giving themselves some wiggle room. So that's another thing that we'll want to keep an eye on is right now it's 0.9%. If it goes up next year to 1.2%, it's a different dollar amount and different story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I am for opting out, knowing that people can individually opt in at this time. But I concur with a lot of my fellow council members and that we just need more information as we go along. And the earlier that we can know this information, I'm okay with having a study session, earlier than later. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's everybody for first round. I think what the purpose of this program is not just for maternity, not just for mothers, because a lot of mothers are also daughters. And a lot of daughters tend to be the ones that have to care for aging parents. And a lot of the fallbacks that we have in the leave programs don't cover that. They don't cover taking care of another family member that needs help. And that I kind of fit that category. But the focus seems to be on the premiums that the employee and Broomfield would have to pay. But who pays for disability insurance? Don't the employees and the employer cover the cost? Where does that money come from?
Broomfield funds that.
Broomfield funds that. So that costs us money too.
Yes, so that was that was why that was an option thrown up, that if we wanted to say yes to this, we certainly could say no to that. So we could reduce the current short-term disability benefit from 100% to 60%. We could eliminate the short-term disability benefit altogether and fund a program like this. We would just need direction from council how to modify the current benefit package.
Has anybody done any cost analysis on what we'd be saving, Broomfield would be saving, if the family leave salaries were being paid by the state program instead of us?
So what we're paying in short-term disability provides a different benefit than the family program. There's some overlap, right? Short-term disability is in the event that the employee is disabled. The family program is broader than that. So if you were to eliminate short-term disability altogether, which provides 100% income replacement, and move to the family program, employees would now be receiving between 37% income replacement and 90% income replacement, depending on their income. So the more the employee makes, the lower their income replacement is. So in the case of people who would qualify for short-term disability, that is a far richer benefit than the family program.
Well, it depends, because it seems like family does a great job with the lower wage workers and prioritizes that. That's why they get the higher percentage. So it really does benefit those lower wage workers. Whereas I just feel like there's not any focus on if we're spending our money on the disability, what are we saving when people opt into family and the state is paying that salary? We're not paying it. So there's a savings there that's not being considered.
And employees can still opt in and cost us nothing. So then the employee would be paying for any additional benefits that they would get through the family program to augment what we're currently providing, not only with short-term disability, but sick leave, annual leave, and donated leave. So there's really a small gap of our employee population that would have a greater benefit from the family program than the current benefits we provide.
Right. But there is a savings to be had if the family state program is paying their leave salaries and we're not.
Yes, and that would come on the backs of our employees because their income replacement would be reduced significantly. So for those employees that previously had 100% income replacement under short-term disability and now only have 37% under the family program, yes, we're saving, but it's on the back of the employees because their income's reduced significantly.
I'm not saying to do away with the short-term disability. I'm just saying that there is a savings to be had with the family program in terms of what we're investing, that 0.49%. But the salaries, when they take leave, are paid by the state program.
A portion of them.
We're not paying for that. We're paying the incremental amount, but the bulk of it would be coming from the state program. There is a savings.
Well, the bulk, I guess it would depend on which employee population you speak of, right? The 37% income replacement, no. The employee who's got a 90% income replacement, yes, that's a small portion of CCOB's employees that would be at that 90% level.
But I don't mean to exhaust the
It's
issue,
okay.
but I mean, it is something that I wanted to fully understand before moving forward. And I do appreciate the Employee Review Committee's recommendation and all of the work that's been put into it. And I don't think we really lose anything by waiting a year as this ramps up and they work out the details. So I do appreciate you indulging us in this conversation to fully understand it.
Happy
Thank
to
you,
do
Ms.
so.
Macklin and Ms. Gilbert. We'll go second round now with Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one additional comment. Obviously, I'm the minority of council members who do not want to opt out of this. That being said, as I mentioned before, and other council member colleagues have mentioned, I would like to look at a expanded leave program for our city staff that includes things like maternity and paternity leave, family leave. That's in addition to already, that's not short-term disability, and it's in addition to vacation and sick time. And I'd like to do that sooner than later. It sounds like several of my colleagues also have the same thought, that waiting till the end of the next year to do it is not sufficient. I think we should be addressing this at least within the first half of next year would be my preference. So that if we're going to do it, it can be budgeted for and can be implemented starting, for example, January 1 of 2024. That would be my preference. Also, an idea that I just had when Mayor Castrada was speaking was, what about some sort of hybrid program where we participate in both, where we participate in the state program, the partial income replacement, and then we add an additional benefit. State pays for 37%. We as a city pay for the rest. And as Mayor Castrada said, I don't believe that we should be taking it from short-term disability or any other benefits that we currently offer. It should come from, we can find the money somewhere else in some other department that needs to, we can figure that out. So even if that means taking it from the money that we would be setting towards reserves. So that's my preference. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. This is probably the last one to speak on this issue. My position hasn't changed from the other night. I support the 1-year delay. I think we need to see how those rulemakings turn out. I think we need to have a better understanding of all these differences. So it's my position has not changed since the other night, and I think a 1-year delay is absolutely prudent and the right thing to do on behalf of our employees and our taxpayers. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Text me if I can't see you on the screen. I think we're good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Macklin and Ms. Gilbert. And we'll move on to the next item. We'll see you on December 6th. Thank you. Our final study session item this evening is staff's request for direction related to potential amendments to the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding residential growth management. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And Anna Burtonzetti, Co-Director of Community Development and Planning Director. We've spent a tremendous amount of time on all things having to do with development and community development and regulating so that there isn't a pendulum shift between turning the hose on and off with regards to development. I think we're all accustomed to having our developers listen intently, and tonight is no different. I can say that we have about 7 people that are paying attention closely to this upcoming conversation. No pressure, Ms. Burtonzetti, and I know A, you don't feel it, and B, it doesn't. It wouldn't change the direction or the tone of the presentation. So please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Anna Burtonzetti, Planning Director. If we have the next slide, please. Throughout 2022, we've had a series of study sessions where we've really dove into the future of development and the tools that we utilize, and as well as discussing the pipeline of projects that we all see coming through in the next few years. During the April and May study sessions, we identified some tools that are available for shaping the future growth and development within Broomfield, and that included the residential growth management regulations that are in the code today. At the time of those discussions, staff identified that this tool, the growth management regulations, could be modified to strengthen its use and to help more directly shape future growth within Broomfield. Tonight's study session continues those discussions that began in April and May of this year regarding the growth management regulations in reviewing some potential changes that could be made to this section of the code. The staff has shaped this ordinance based on the input that was received during the prior study sessions. As a quick summary, the current residential growth management regulations were established first in 1998. It limits Broomfield to issuing building permits for not more than 300 residential units in any calendar year. There are, however, a number of exemptions that are allowed from this maximum 300 units. Those exemptions include things like projects that have vested rights, projects that have development agreements that specifically require Broomfield to not withhold building permits. And then City Council also has the ability to exempt projects, multifamily projects, on a case-by-case basis, and has done so over the last few years, really since 1998. Next slide, please.
In around 2006 to 2007, residential development did decline in Broomfield, and only a small percentage of the yearly 300 residential units were utilized, since the majority of projects during this time, and it even continues today, were exempt from this requirement. So that includes developments in Anthem, Arista, as well as individual multifamily projects that were granted exemptions. By 2022, there were still a number of units from the various prior years that had not been utilized. But as we are nearing the end of 2022, staff is seeing that there will not be a significant amount of rollover available for 2023. So at this time, we're estimating around 5 to 25 units not being utilized that would be available for potential rollover to 2023. And I give a range there because the numbers change just about daily as we hear from different developers. In 2023 and 2024, there are currently more units anticipated to be requested than there are available units allocated for the year. In other words, there's more than 300 units that are not exempted yet that are proposed to pull building permits in 2023 and 2024. Most of these anticipated projects are still in the development pipeline. So all of the multifamily projects that are in the pipeline will be requesting exemptions as is currently allowed under the code. It's also possible that some of these projects may not move forward. They could choose not to move forward due to market changes, or they could choose to move forward based on a lack of support during the development review process. For example, if they were not granted approval. The projects that are within the pipeline include big projects like Broomfield Town Square, Flatiron Crossing, Flatiron Marketplace redevelopment and others. Next slide, please. As there continues to be strong interest in residential development, staff brought forward this proposed amendment for discussion, trying to be consistent with the goals of council for the basis of discussion. The intended purpose is to provide a simplified process moving forward, including potential exemptions for projects that feature desirable elements such as affordable on-site units for multifamily. The intent is also to provide developers and the community with some specific examples that they could consider and incorporate if requesting an exemption, such as mixed-use development, higher densities that support transit corridors. But City Council would ultimately still have to evaluate each of these individual projects on their own individual merit. It should be stated that the amendments, are not intended to stop residential development or to change any existing entitlements for existing projects. The intent is to modify this tool, the growth management regulations, just to strengthen how it can be used to better shape future growth in Broomfield. Next slide, please. Some of the key elements included within the draft include exempting projects with development or reimbursement agreements rather than relying on specific language within each of those individual agreements. Exempting all projects with on-site affordable units that meet Broomfield's inclusionary housing requirements. Clarifying that any replacement dwellings, for example, if it was a total loss and someone was replacing, or if someone chose to replace an existing dwelling with a new dwelling, or accessory dwelling units would not count against the total numbers. Continuing to allow City Council's case-by-case evaluation of residential developments for exemptions, but also providing a list of criteria for evaluating those exemptions. And for the purpose of discussion, staff did include some within the draft, such as support those projects that support economic vitality goals, incorporating significant sustainability elements, those that are provide density within bus rapid transit corridors, and those projects that are mixed use. Other elements could be included by City Council based on tonight's discussion. Since these amendments would likely, if effective, exempt a number of projects, staff also included in the draft a reduction in the total number of non-exempt residential units that could be issued in a year. In the draft, it's provided at 200 rather than 300 units. Next slide, please. Staff included a list of questions to help guide tonight's discussion. It can be found at the end of the memorandum. Importantly, one of the first questions that we would like direction on is whether City Council would like to consider amendments to this section of the code. Alternatively, it could remain in place as it is today, or it could be repealed in its entirety. Next slide, please. If an amendment is desired, specifically staff is requesting direction as to whether to expand the list of exemptions or modify those that are existing. And if City Council is interested in providing requirements for granting exemptions, direction would be needed regarding what types of elements City Council would like to see for those individual exemptions. Next slide, please. Finally, staff is needing direction regarding whether there is an interest in reducing the amount of units for non-exempt projects. As currently it's proposed at 200, down from 300, and whether the city manager should be able to roll over units from year to year if available, or whether that should remain with the City Council. And that concludes staff's presentation. We look forward to getting your feedback so that we can, if directed, bring back an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton-Zetti. We'll now go to council member questions. Who wants to be first? Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you've all heard my comments on this particular issue several times now. My position is that we should repeal the entire residential growth limit and remove it from our code. I think Broomfield has such an affordable housing crisis largely because some of our neighboring communities have opted for what I think are arbitrary growth limits on residential units. And I think these growth limits that we're seeing in some of our neighboring communities and across the Denver metro region are why we have this affordable housing crisis. I think they're a big reason. And I think they're contributing to climate change, affecting our planet, increasing our GHG emissions from transportation. And I just don't think it's prudent for Broomfield to be playing a part in what is I think a mistake for our region as a whole. So I don't think by us passing this ordinance, we'll be being very good neighbors. And I think it's a little bit selfish. And I think if all of our surrounding municipalities did not have these limits, we would have a little bit, more affordable housing and a little bit would be just a little bit closer to our climate and GHG reduction goals. So I don't want to see Broomfield take part in this. I think we should repeal it and move on from this conversation and keep growing and moving forward as a community. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Marsh-Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be brief. I agree with everything Councilmember Lindstedt just said. I think this is an ordinance that most of us didn't even know existed till this year. We haven't followed it in years. We as council have the authority to basically do anything that's already in the exemptions. So my direction would be to repeal this ordinance in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if I'll be as quick, but I'll try to be. I'll try to keep it moving. So the issue of banking, this is one that I was surprised by the fact that we have a bank of unused building permits. And looking at the code, it looks like that those, in order for us to bank unused building permits, council must pass a resolution. And I'm failing to see where those past council resolutions have been issued. I don't recall in the nearly 5 years that I've been on council that I've ever passed a unused building permits resolution. So I'm unsure how we're getting those numbers for those unused resolutions at this point.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaaf. And we did discuss this in April as well, that you're correct. The rollovers are intended to have council direction. We actually will be bringing forward the 2022 to 2023 potential rollover for council direction at the end of this year. Somewhere around 2006 to 2007, the best we can find in the records was when those rollovers stopped formally being taken to city council. There were some prior actions prior to that, a little redundant, sorry, for projects like Spruce Meadows that just said, in future years, until they're built out, they get as many units as they need to for the following years. But we really don't have good accounting from 2006, 2007 to forward. What we did do is go back and account for what units were exempted versus which units were not exempted from 2006 to present, and then kind of backed in with where we were on accounting wise. And that's how we determined that this is the year we really do run out of any potential rollover units from all of that time this year. So we need to consider, or City Council will need to consider that rollover at the end of this year. I think it'll be around 5 to 23 units. It's not very many, but City Council, you're right, should take that formal action.
But you're saying from 2006 or 2007, there hasn't been a council resolution, to say that any unused building permits will be rolled over.
That's correct. Administratively, it has been done, but it was not correctly taken to City Council for a formal action.
Okay, so are we considering any unused building permits that happened between 2006 or 2007 to present day?
Yes, this year we were accounting for some rollover. I think it was around 250 rollover from prior years within this year's what we counted as our allocation for this
That
year.
occurred between 2006 to 2007 and current?
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, I kind of, I disagree with the premise in which we're dealing with that banking. I think that, this is another reason why, it's mind boggling. I don't put this on staff necessarily to ensure that we're following this, but and especially the timing, given the recession that we had coming in 2008. So there was a lot on council's plate. There was a lot on staff's plate at that point. So it is a piece with this growth ordinance that I do think that we have to deal with, and it sounds like that we would. My council colleagues have suggested that we just repeal this entire growth ordinance. And I guess, what are the reasons to not just repeal this ordinance? Are there things that with this ordinance, this gives the ability for council to deny a residential application that council would consider? Or is this just concerning those building permits, and it's not necessarily a part of our consideration of a residential building application?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Schaaf. I think this is one of many tools in the toolbox that are available to City Council. It doesn't change council's ability to evaluate every residential project that comes through with a PUD or a site development plan. That review process still remains regardless whether this remains in place or is amended or repealed. It is one tool that can be utilized. The amendments that we proposed, staff approached it with, how could this be strengthened to try and help incentivize particular developments? And that was our approach. It wasn't that it would stop other developments. It was just that it provides an additional incentive for projects that are able to, for example, incorporate affordable units. They would automatically know that they are exempted from this requirement within the code. Other projects would have to wait through the development process and have that discussion with City Council at that public hearing regarding whether or not the merits of their proposal exempt them from the requirements, or whether they would have to space out their permits potentially over multiple years.
Okay. So to kind of go off on that point, if this ordinance was the sole reason for denying an application because they aren't meeting those exceptions and they would exceed the amount of building permits that could be used that year, do we extend any legal liability in that this is the sole reason for denying that application?
Probably answer a portion of it and then ask our attorney to weigh in on the legal liability. But this particular ordinance wouldn't be utilized for a denial of the request. If there were no units available, all allocation was anticipated to be utilized for, let's say, 2023. Staff would be communicating that with the developer early to make sure that they're aware of that fact. And if they choose to move forward, we'd be looking at 2024 and 2025 for their allocations.
Okay.
And again, they'd also probably request an exemption. So they'd be looking at that opportunity when they come before you.
That helps. So I guess you had mentioned that this is just one more tool, and I'm failing to see how this replaces some of the other tools that we have to enhance, our developments that we have going on. And so, are there other ways that we can achieve what this amended, and I appreciate all the work that staff has done on this. I didn't say that because I do think that pointing out these pieces that that council has given direction to staff to say these are things that we want to see in our residential developments. And I think that the development community has responded to those to say, yes, many of these are priorities of our developments as well. And so I think that we want to continue to encourage and guide those developments to be more specific with Broomfield's goals and policies. But is there a different way that we can do that without having this growth ordinance?
I believe there's many ways that we can look at development regulation updates. And in fact, staff does not have any concerns with a potential repeal of this ordinance.
Okay, so you had said that their staff is looking at some of those possible ways to which to do this. Do we have those in place now, or would we need to do some other additional work in order to make sure that those tools are in place?
I think we have many tools that are already available to us. Most new developments do come through the planned unit development process and the site development review process. And those are great tools that we are able to utilize. We also have some effective sub-area plans. We have the comprehensive plan that outlines our goals and objectives, and our concept review process that provides an opportunity for the development community to get comments, not just from the community like a neighborhood meeting, but directly from council as well as from any other interested parties early in the review process, is unique and really helps us to shape future developments as they're coming through the process. I think that this ordinance lays on top of all of those, but I don't think it replaces any. It just is another tool available to us. It's not better or worse. It is a tool that we utilize.
Okay, great. I think that with all of that, I would be in favor of just repealing this ordinance. It doesn't sound to me that this does anything for us other than limits it kind of signals the message that Broomfield is limiting residential development. And I don't think that is our message here in Broomfield. I do think that what we are trying to do is to encourage development that is more consistent with Broomfield's goals and policies. And I think that is the message that we want to send, is that here's the type of development that we are seeking, and that we continue to work with our development community to ensure that is the development that we want going forward. So I would be in favor of repealing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would be in favor of repealing if there was clarity as to where we were going. I recall last year when we had our retreat, City Manager Hoffman talking about wanting to have a greater strategic direction for the remaining development in Broomfield, which, as I recall, is about 20% of our land. I think there are several other issues, not just affordable housing, but sustainability and other related codes are increasingly important issues, and we've really not yet gotten to them as much. We got the EV thing passed, but we have issues around water and plantings and related issues around those issues, including air quality. So I would like to see something that would be more strategic, that would outline where we are going, so that we give better direction to the developers, to the point just made, as to what we want. I'm not in favor of these rollovers. I don't understand them at all. I think those should go away. But I do think that we should be more deliberative and directional as to what we want where. And I remember City Manager Hoffman talking about, if certain places, certain land areas where we would determine what we want there, and then we would go out and recruit developers to put there what we want, rather than us constantly responding to any developer that wants to put another gas station up on a corner or whatever they want to do. So my advocacy here is that we go ahead and eliminate this, but that we replace it with something very specific and very strategic. Thank you.
Mayor, may I?
Sure.
So Councilmember Leslie, that's just exactly what we're doing. So the structure that we have in place with, between community development and economic development. So between the housing team being established, Anna, and I can see Brandon here as well, their team and structure from the front end to the back end has all been restructured around economic vitality and the matrix and the chasing, right? So our whole economic vitality team is doing just that. So I'm hoping the council has noticed that you all aren't having to ask the same questions over and over and over and over again. So when you have any kind of fail safe, which is essentially what a growth cap does, it's a much simpler way to be able to say, and that's why the original recommendation was to repeal, simply because all of the other structures that were being put in place was so that you didn't have a fail safe. Because intentional development, it doesn't mean smart growth. You get jammed up every time you say smart growth because it all depends on the person that you're asking how smart it is. So the structure is in place, Councilmember Leslie. It's been activated. I think the programs and the projects that you all have seen over the last 6 months reflect that significantly. And it's really that the 18 months in order to get the structure in place. So in 2023, we know that there's a master water plan coming. We know that there's the housing needs assessment coming. We know there's OSTAC and PRAC coming. We need to look at that strategic plan. Again, similar to the last conversation, something isn't going to happen in order for anything new to happen. Something isn't going to happen from a pay perspective unless something else that we've already committed to doesn't happen. I mean, that's going to be our life for the next 3 years. So again, we see what fail safes do, right? It hasn't been acted on since 2006. And what happens with those rollovers is you don't have to have a structure in place when you have a fail safe. Because nobody has that intentional thinking about how much is going to happen when, what is the cadence and what is it that we want? Because you know, when you come to the end of the year, your fail safe is going to be coming back saying, okay, well, now we only have X number. So we don't operate that way. Anna certainly hasn't structured her staff that way. And if Mr. Romine was here, he would certainly be indicating that, nor does he. So, we wouldn't bring something to council about repealing if we weren't confident that there weren't going to be any gaps as we move forward, particularly for the development community.
Good. Yeah, well, I support what you're saying.
Is that all, Councilmember?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Schaaf asked most of the questions I had, but I wanted to follow up with reference to our neighboring municipalities who have similar caps. And I assume you referred to them or referenced them in researching what you proposed. Were there any findings there and what worked and didn't work in terms of achieving our goals?
Councilmember Cohen, we really focused on our own code and looked at it through the lens of if this is not repealed and it were to stay here, how could we make this tool more effective? So we did not do a comparative analysis with any of the other municipalities.
Do all the municipalities around us have similar caps?
No,
Who doesn't?
I don't have a list, but I can certainly get one for you. Or if we brought it back for a first reading, we could have that in the memorandum at that time.
So we don't necessarily know what their experience has been with not having a cap and having other tools. We just looked at what our tool was, right?
For this amendment, we focused on this tool that we have existing and just tried to look at how it could be modified to meet our goals.
Because I'm curious, I'm sympathetic to the idea of repealing in the sense that considering our serious lack of housing, that having a cap doesn't make intuitive sense. But I'm at a loss of, how do we leverage, or it seems like it would have substantial leverage to get the kind of housing we want. And without that cap, I'm not sure what's available to us that's as potent.
Councilmember Cohen, if the question is more what other tools are available, I think council recently updated the inclusionary housing ordinance to make that tool much more clear and a better, more effective tool. And those types of amendments, looking at what we have and strengthening each of them would be the way to reach that goal.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we're one of very few that has an inclusionary housing
That is correct.
two, I think, or is it more than that now? I would be interested in knowing what the experience of those without a cap before we went there. I think it's always helpful to look with the extreme opposite to see what we might be missing before I went to that degree. I do think some of these, as I said, I don't like the idea of a cap, but it might be better to maybe index it, perhaps to infrastructure, water, other factors that may be in place, that we look at that as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, there were other council members who had their hands up before I did. Did
They
wanna
weren't
go
on
first?
screen, so I couldn't see their hands. I could only see the hands of the folks that had their camera on. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. I'll
You
go
get to
ahead then.
First.
Okay, thanks. So am I, in hearing City Manager Hoffman talk, am I interpreting this correctly that obviously the structures will hopefully be in place to make our desired components of development clearer in the next year or so? But is there a purpose in having this as a gap filler until all of those structures in place? The numbers that we will have coming forward in permits in 2023 could be looked at as unworkable for the city. And so would this tool be looked at as a gap filler until all the structures are in place? Hopefully that makes sense.
Councilmember, the overage, we do anticipate, as you mentioned, an overage, more units requested than there are available in 2023. I should note it's really due to two large multifamily projects that will be considered by City Council in early 2023. Both are requesting exemption. So if the ordinance were repealed, they would not need to request an exemption. But if the ordinance remains in place, City Council would still have the ability to grant an exemption. Again, in the past, it has just been a request. No justification has been requested or needed. Council can just consider it as part of the overall project. But those two projects alone, the actions taken by City Council could either bring them into compliance, or the projects would need to space out their units, build only particular units in 2023, which is likely, and then space out the rest of the units for 2024. Large residential projects, unless it is a single build, like a single building around a parking garage, is often in multiple buildings, and they often occur phased over time.
Okay, I mean, I appreciate to that extent that, we may have an overflow for next year of permits. I appreciate, and even the following year till all the structures are in place. I appreciate the fact that staff tried to prioritize the council priorities, incentivize, I guess, the council priorities. So, we still have the issue of the developers not putting in the on-site inclusionary housing units. This prioritizes that. I appreciate the fact that it's going to incorporate one of the exemptions would be looking at if it incorporates significant environmental sustainability elements. I would have some ideas on perhaps what that could be as far as significant environmental sustainability elements. So I've had discussions recently with some council members about our desire to see some kind of electric ready, electric preferred code come forward in the building codes. So I know many of us are thinking in that direction as far as a significant environmental sustainability element. And then I also appreciated the fact that one of the requirements that could be listed to request an exemption would be locating within a half a mile of bus rapid transit, but you have to kind of put a caveat there. I mean, that's not completely within our control if we're going to get that bus rapid transit or not. I mean, that's the issue we've been facing. So at Colorado 7, if we put a lot of density up there, we don't really know if CDOT's going to come forward and or anybody's going to come forward to help us with that transit. A few of us were just in Lone Tree to look at their transit-oriented development and, to see the help that they got and to hear about the help that they got from the state and we have not gotten is a little discouraging when we really are trying to align our efforts, as another council member said, to reduce GHGs, reduce transportation of employees in and out of the city. So I'm not following some of the other council member arguments that we need to increase density of housing to support our GHG goals unless we can guarantee that we get the multimodal transportation. And that is not completely at this time within our control, as far as I know. So I'm a little torn on if I would support repealing this when it seems like it could be a good tool, at least till all the structures are in place. So those are my thoughts for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I was a little slow up here. I was listening to Jean and I'm like, yeah, exactly. Because I'm on the fence too. Here we have a situation where we can really incentivize, what we really want. And we have to have those systems in place. So I would really want to push for us to be, front loading our expectations. And then once we get that done, then we can, unleash, residential. I will say that it's really stunning to me, and maybe this is just a question for staff, and maybe this is just sort of a rhetorical question. Is there a cap on open space? Is there a cap on commercial? Where else do we see caps? Are we only capping residential? And I think we all know why, but I think people need to know why people would cap residential.
Councilmember, this is the growth ordinance for Broomfield is a residential growth ordinance. So we do not have a similar cap for future commercial or employment or other land uses.
Okay. So I just want to remind kind of the public that if we didn't have a cap on commercial, let's say, we would still have a ton of people, in certain areas that are zoned for commercial. So I don't want people to say that, if we're going to unleash residential, that we wouldn't have the same thing happening with commercial. So I also want to make it sort of a fair playing game that, we need to cap, possibly other areas because they involve people. And I think we really kind of shoot ourselves in the foot going along with Councilmember Lim in the fact that if we don't have that density, then we can't have transportation usually. That's generally what I'm seeing. And it's really unfortunate, like, with Anthem, we have refugees up there that can't even go anywhere. They're landlocked. And they don't have any transportation up there. And it's because we really typically don't have the density to support that. However, I will say that Lone Tree, they did, have their light rail going because the people voted for it locally. They wanted that tax. So that's something that maybe we could talk about further. But I am of the same alignment with Councilmember Lim in that we might want to hang tight until we find out what we can do on the front end to really guide our developers and where we want to go. But I don't want to cap density where we need density. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Couns-
may I real quickly?
Sure.
So I think one of the pieces that we talk about and continue to talk about and know for the 3 text messages that I just got, we're not talking about capping commercial development, that this is strictly residential. And here's without a growth cap. And so I want to speak a little bit to Councilmember Cohen. Lakewood was the most recent, had lunch with the Lakewood city manager, specifically when we started talking about this and the growth cap and how it's working there. And so again, the unintended consequences, as Councilmember Lindstedt referred to, that's not anecdotal information. It's factual information from the push. We've seen what happens in from Boulder County's growth cap. Great for that community. Or is it, right? So, I mean, again, it's in the eye of the beholder. But when we're looking at, here's the growth cap that isn't even statutory. So we're at about 78,000 people now. We're going to be at 98,000 people. We are estimating 19,000 from what has already been approved. A 19,000 population increase within the next 3 to 5 years. Based on that, we are going to be at 99% of our infrastructure capacity. 99% of our, so we have no wiggle room. The goal is to be at 90% at build out. We're going to be at 99% of capacity. And again, I keep saying that because when we're talking about deferred maintenance, when we're talking about shoring up the water and the capacity and the point A to point B, that is development. So again, between all, and again, the structural piece, happy to entertain more structure around that, but what we've put in place during the last 18 months is specific to this conversation tonight. So I'm not seeing additional structure in order to alleviate or to make a decision on this growth cap, other than we're going to be at 99% of capacity from our infrastructure, on our infrastructure within the next 3 to 5 years, which is about a $250 million
Manager
price
Hoffman,
tag.
wouldn't that be the argument for modulating or having that cadence for growth?
No, that's just saying no.
Just say no what?
Just say no, we don't want that development,
Oh, okay.
right?
On a
I
case
mean,
by case basis. kind of thing.
absolutely.
Okay.
And so when you have a structure that is intentional
Right.
to make these decisions, that's why we continue to do the concept reviews, right? We are the only municipality that does concept
I
reviews.
know.
Oh, the only one. So again, the cadence with which our review process moves through right now, the additive will be the additional building codes. But the bottom underline is our infrastructure. We're tapped right now. So again, as we're moving forward on these additional conversations about how much stuff costs, the deferred maintenance piece, current service level, right? And the reason I continue to bring that up is because that is the nexus of what success looks like for Broomfield for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. It's a much deeper conversation than should we approve some more residential permits. It's a much bigger conversation. So as we move forward, here's one of the other structural changes is water will be tied to everything. So every acre foot, every additional CBT and what those costs look like. And that has to be part of the decision-making factor.
So a follow-up question then, sorry, is for our financial questions or our financial, what do we call it? I'm forgetting right now, my brain.
Financial plan.
Well, yeah, so our long-range financial plan, sorry, I've been on Taylor Swift website all day trying to get tickets. It's been a hot mess, I gotta tell you. I haven't been on right now, but I just think, with our long term, our long range financial plans, like what, I've mentioned this probably 3 or 4 times, like we need to figure out what goes into that too. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about our long range financial, impact? And are we talking about infrastructure? Because if we're talking about infrastructure, then that's what the taxpayers, really pay for. If we're talking about, what commercial can bring in, if we're talking about, like, I would like to know how much would extra people tax other people? Does that make sense? Like, I'm going to be really very 4th grade about it, but I think that's where a lot of people kind of had those concerns. And like you said, with the water, it's kind of like, okay, where will these fees come from? Or where will these, additional, strains happen? So, I just need to know that. So
Councilmember Hinkle, Abby too has been working hard to get her beautiful daughter today. So we're all helping out with that. Again, that's part of the regulating. So you don't have a fail safe of a growth cap. You have all of these others. So we transitioned, if council will remember, when we had the focus session, the way Broomfield has done it before is that the 5-year long range financial plan was looked at every 5 years and then updated. We don't do it that way anymore. And when we made the shift to budget based on the revenue and not expenses, you have to, you can't just do one piece of that pie. So from a totality of circumstances, when you shift that philosophy into basing on expenses, you have to have a mobile and agile. So if you can remember the model that we deployed for Flatirons and for Broomfield Town Square, where we now say per rooftop, here's how much the services are, here's how much sales tax they bring, here's how much the FTEs will be, right? Again, that comprehensive approach in order to make that happen. The one piece that we haven't done, you'll see it coming on the council memos, is calling out those fiscal notes. And part of those fiscal notes is operations, the staffing in order to get it done. And most importantly, it's the infrastructure. So again, when any of these decisions that council is making is not, should we have infill or not? For the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be, can we afford to do this? So again, whether they have solar, whether they have EV charging stations, whether they are zero-scaped, regardless of the accoutrements that they bring in front of you, the bottom line is, can we afford right now and for the next 3 to 5 years to do this development?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the shift. And so again, the regulating, so the increase in the water rates, increase in the tap fees, increase in the development fees, all of those are regulators. It's not going to have a pendulum swing to everything is going to happen or nothing's going to happen. It's those very intentional steps to be able to say, is this good for the whole? That's the structure that's in place right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll talk offline a little bit more about infrastructure and maybe how we can dissect that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Councilmember Lindstadt said, and I think we should repeal the ordinance in its entirety. And I think the better place to put requirements of what we would like developers to have in terms of environmental sustainability and density and parking, et cetera, would be to do code amendments and adjustments there instead of just kind of giving preference to developers who are able to give us this stuff. So that's really all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me. Originally I was looking at this thinking it wasn't necessarily a bad idea. As I've heard tonight, this was kind of a planning tool, and allowing, I think I heard the word somewhere, incentivize, certain types of developments. And that would be through the exceptions like the affordable housing or things that meet our business development goals. So I get that, but I really did appreciate the comments from Councilmember Schaaf today. I think we're in sync on these past couple topics, as well as Councilmember Lim as well. And let me thinking a little bit as to when would this really come into play? So it sounds like there are a lot of other structures that are either in place or going to be in place in the future. So what I've heard so far, and let me know if I'm wrong, is that, and I keep hearing the word fail-safe. So does this really come into play in the situation where we approve a development that may not meet any of the requirements that we would like to see, but it somehow still gets approved, and then this allows for this? I guess it would be it would provide an additional structure to make sure that we're not building faster than the infrastructure allows. I think that's what I just heard from City Manager Hoffman. So, I mean, is that really what this is? I mean, is that where it comes into play? I'm just trying to figure out why we would need this.
Sorry, council member. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. No, I don't think that this ordinance is particularly needed. It is one of the many tools that can be utilized, but it alone wouldn't stop growth or change it. The one thing it would do in your example, if a project didn't meet the exemption requirements, they would have to, in their site development plan with this amendment, self-identify what their allocation would be. How fast would they develop? And so in that way, for these non-exempt projects, Brimfield would be able to have them move forward at a more measured pace that is established through the site development plan process by the city council in that action in terms of how many units are allocated per year. But there's many other ways that we can address ensuring that there's an incentive for projects that are meeting or the requirements through amendments to the comprehensive plan, as Councilmember Ward mentioned, through the municipal code and the zoning regulations and subdivision regulations. Those tools will remain available to us, and in some ways are a stronger way to shape growth, since they are requirements that really do change the development itself.
Okay, and are those ways that can ensure a steady and deliberate growth, as opposed to when I'm hearing the concern of a growth that is too quick for us to sustain?
So Mayor Pro Tem, I think that gets back to what City Manager Hoffman had mentioned, which is that if City Council, as they're reviewing site development plans, PUD plans coming forward, part of what you're evaluating is impact on the community, whether they have maximized their positive impacts, they've minimized any negative impacts. And if it's determined that those things are not being met, council can determine whether that needs a conditional approval or whether that development should not be approved at that time.
Okay, and I kind of feel like that's what we are doing now. We may not have done that in the past years ago, I think when I first got on city council, but I feel like we're doing that more and more now, and I think that's great. So yeah, I'm gonna think about this one more, but I guess struggling to find a real reason to move forward with this one. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, are you saying move forward with it or repeal it?
Move forward with the suggestion to, so yeah, move forward with the actual what was being proposed, I guess.
Okay.
That's what I'm questioning.
Gotcha. Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, thank you. This has been a very helpful discussion, and I think my whole thought process here is hinging on section 40K, the exemptions, because of everything. Like, is there any leverage in that when you're saying that? Because so much is already exempted, and you come down to a developer who's not meeting the requirements. And is there any leverage under section 40K with the additional exemptions where a developer would change something, or that would all occur through the site development plan? And yeah, because I'm struggling now to whether this is necessary or not.
Councilmember Anderson, I think there is a potential that a developer who does not have vested rights, does not have a development agreement, has not been able to find a way to provide inclusionary housing on their site. Maybe that provides that extra incentive to try and find a way to provide those units or to incorporate mixed use into their development to ensure that there is an exemption. But even without all of that, under today's ordinance, they could request an exemption, and city council could weigh the factors that the merits of the proposal as it is today. And if the ordinance did not exist in its entirety, those merits could be evaluated through the site development plan process.
Okay, because I'm trying to see if we have this, if there's so much complexity here, we're not really accomplishing that much additional, and that would be, it seems like repealing it makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing here tonight, is that so unless there's something, unless there's something substantial there, it seems like this would be just better to repeal it. But I do have one kind of question, a little bit slightly different ask, is that, and I know we're focusing just on residential and this whole growth piece, but that whole balancing in the long range financial plan of the commercial versus the residential, and this helps us, doesn't help us at all in that realm. But do you have any additional, any thoughts to add there on how we keep the commercial caught up to the residential?
I think the most significant thing that we can do to continue to have balance is to be proactive. So again, we have a very engaged council. We have a very engaged community that make it really clear with what they want to see and when they want to see it and what they don't want to see. And so again, having it, it's so transparent now. So when this growth cap was put into place, transparency was not something that was even capable, right? I mean, again, from a technology perspective. So again, between the structure that's in place, between the team that we've built, between council's direction over the last 2 years of what is and what is important, having baked that in, particularly on the front end. So we continue to talk about how important it is that staff and council are in alignment with regards to development, so that when Anna and her crew and Jeff and his crew are having conversations with these developers, we are confident enough to be able to say, no, we don't want that on that corner of Midway and Lowell. Council's made it really clear that that is not something, it's never precluded if the developer says, I hear you, I want to come and I want to hear it from council. We still have that pipeline and that ability to do that. 99% is being captured on the front end to be able to say, this is what we want, this is where we want it. And a portion of that is us chasing and going and getting that. When you're proactive, you can control so much easier and so much more fuller than when you're constantly reactive and having to say, no, but not yet. No, but not there. Or we just continue to say yes, right? So again, it's that structure on the front end that makes a really significant difference.
Okay, thank you. And then the only additional thought or question I have there is, so we continue this proactive method that we're using. The next 5 years are critical. This isn't like a 20, 30-year program. It's going to happen quickly. So I think that gives me confidence. And if staff feels confident in repealing this growth ordinance, I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Anyone else? First round? I think everybody went. Yeah, I think for those listening at home, Broomfield is not anti-growth. Being the fastest growing county in the last 10 years, growing 33% should illustrate that. And as City Manager Hoffman said, we're expecting almost 20,000 new residents in the next 3 to 5 years. In the 5 years I've been on this council, we've rarely denied a residential application unless it was a big hit to our long-range financial plan, which we can't allow. So I don't think there's any need to worry. But what does give me pause is that we're going to max out on our infrastructure. We're going to max out if we don't proceed cautiously and methodically and intentionally like we have been. So does this serve a purpose? I don't know. We didn't put it in place and we didn't even know about it. So maybe it doesn't serve a purpose, and we've already have other tools in place to manage that growth, but we're not anti-growth for the record. But I do worry about keeping our service levels up for the existing residents. You know, if we grow too fast, what's going to suffer? Because we already know our police department and courts are busting at the seams. Our libraries busting at the seams. We need to ask the voters to pay a little more to handle this expansion next year, you know? So I think that's the concern, right? Do we grow too fast?
We just have to be really mindful with every single decision that's made on the dais that has dollar signs attached.
Got it. Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Anyone else for second round? Is that good? Well, I hope you got some good direction, Ms. Burtonzetti, and keeping track because I wasn't. But it seemed like leaning in favor of repealing. Is that what you kind of got to?
I have to admit, I'm relying on Mr. Rowe for notes.
Oh,
so
good.
Hopefully he's
Is that-
got that, but I think he's nodding along that I think we do have direction. We will bring back an ordinance for consideration of a repeal.
Thank you both very much. Well, that concludes the agenda items for this evening's study session. There being no further business, the study session is adjourned. Thank you all.